how might these latest sanctions affect Russia? Are they enough to deter Vladimir Putin's actions in Ukraine? Let's talk to Reid Whitten, who's from the law firm Sheppard Mullin and an expert on sanctions. Reid, welcome. Since about 2014, Russia has been under sanctions after President Putin's annexation of Crimea. Are these new sanctions really going to have any impact?
Yeah, I think they will. I think that's a good question. In 2014, the United States sanctions went after the oil and gas extraction industries. They were very targeted. These new sanctions take on Russian banking and Russian finance, and particularly the finance of big business projects by Putin's oligarch inner circle and the funding of Russia's defense. They're very targeted at these two of the 10 largest banks in Russia.
If Putin is absolutely philosophically set on the invasion of Ukraine, sanctions at this perhaps relatively late stage could be a bit of a sideshow, couldn't they?
It's possible, although they have kept some of their powder dry in the U.S. and in the EU. So there are more sanctions they can bring out that could really cripple the Russian economy. We just heard about the gold reserves that Russia has built up in this sort of Fortress Russia project that it's undertaken. But those can only last so long, and the U.S. can effectively cut Russia off from not just the U.S. financial system, but the larger global financial system, because no European or Asian bank will want to deal with a Russian bank that is subject to U.S. sanctions.
Might Western sanctions be counterproductive in the sense that they could drive Russian nationalism and perhaps force Russia to find other ways of doing business elsewhere?
Absolutely, and that's always part of the discussion about the sort of philosophy behind the use of sanctions. If you weaponize the interdependence of national economies, you can have some blowback, and that is that, right now, because of the way the world is after World War II, the U.S. dollar is kind of the coin and trade for all of global economy. But if you use sanctions too much, you might drive countries to seek other ways of interacting economically. And so there is always a risk of overplaying your hand. At this point, I don't think it's a huge risk, but it is always something to be considered.
This sanctions package was agreed unanimously by the foreign ministers in Paris. Western countries seem united at the moment on sanctions. How strong is this alliance?
That's a great question. The alliance is as strong as the resolution of its weakest link. As you heard before, Italy depends very heavily on Russia for gas and oil, so they're going to have some hesitation to go much farther. And when you have a coalition inputting sanctions, it's a lot like ordering pizza with your friends. It's kind of hard to get everybody to agree on what you're gonna have on your pizza. It is a lot easier to implement sanctions unilaterally, which means that the U.S., with all of the force of the U.S. dollar behind its sanctions, has a lot of strength in this face-off with Russia. Whereas the EU, which has to get all the member states to agree, is going to have to move a little bit less decisively, because it's going to have to convince all of the members to engage in the sanctions.
This is round one of economic sanctions. What do you think comprises round two?
I think that they could probably, especially from the U.S. perspective, you're going to see the increase of the number of banks that are sanctioned. Now, remember, the banks that are sanctioned here are big banks that finance the military, that finance big projects. I think you might see Gazprom Bank, the Russian direct investment funds, kind of the big funders of international projects, of show projects, of trophy projects that the U.S. will go after. I don't think they'll go after sort of domestic Russian banks where mom and pop shops or local individuals bank. I think that would be kind of aiming at the Russian people. I think they really want to focus on big Russian business and the defense industry. After that, it may be cutting Russian banking off from the SWIFT system, as we heard discussed before. And I think that kind of remains as the nuclear option.
Can Western countries dishing out economic sanctions always come out of this scenario economically unscathed?
Oh, not at all. In fact, that's always a complicating factor of implementing sanctions, is that when you are injuring the economy of another country, you can also injure yourself. And you see this a lot in the interplay of big global economies, particularly recently with the U.S. and China. Anything that you do that strikes the other economy, because your economy depends on it, you definitely take some blowback on yourself. Now, in the case of the U.S. and Russia, the relationship is less interdependent, but the EU certainly faces potential damage from from sanctions on Russia that could hurt its economy and especially its imports of oil and gas.
Reid Whitten from the law firm Sheppard Mullin in London, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.